The heat wave. When this term comes to your mind, you will think about countries in equatorial and tropical areas. But interestingly, European continent is witnessing one of the worst heat wave of its entire history. It is believed that over 1,300 people have died as a direct or indirect result of heat wave. WHO says that the possibility of these death figure rising is much more higher in the near future. So let us try to understand the entire detail about why such kind of heat wave is being observed around European continent, and is it just a one-off event or a warning from the climate change? So first of all, to get a background of this particular topic, we can see that Europe is witnessing unprecedented early summer heat wave. Multiple countries broke all temperature records, and WHO have warned of hundreds of excess deaths that countries, especially in the Western Europe, can face. Heat wave has been linked directly to the climate change, and public health infrastructure in almost all these countries seems to be under stress, and that makes sense because the infrastructure of these countries are largely designed to trap the heat, because most of the time these countries faced cold situation, winter situation. Now, if you look at the statement coming from the Director General of World Health Organization, that is Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus, he has stated that 1,300 plus excess death has been reported since 21st June 2026. Now, when you talk about excess death, it simply means that generally every year you have a certain death figure that takes place in these countries. If extra death is being recorded in a certain time duration, those can be associated with some unusual phenomena, and that unusual phenomena in this case is the heat wave situation. Heat stress has emerged as a silent killer in this situation, and Europe is at a higher risk. When you talk about climate change, when you talk about global warming, we understand that this is a phenomena taking place and unfolding at the entire global scale. But if you compare different continents, the effect is not similar. So WHO DG has stated that Europe is warming at a twice rate than the global average, and they are facing severe consequences also because of the fact that the buildings that you have in these countries, European countries, they are not designed for extreme heat. So that's where the problem comes, because if you talk about tropical countries, equatorial countries, generally or historically they have always had higher temperature, and that's why the entire infrastructure is designed around it. For example, in tropical countries such as India, you have the availability of fans, air conditioner, coolers, and all that. Plus, the building we have designed in such a manner that there is a free circulation of air. In the European countries, buildings, however, are designed to trap the heat. They do not even, most of buildings do not have air conditioning system. They do not have even fans and such. And whenever this heat wave like situation arises, the same temperature that is of about 40 degrees Celsius, 41 degrees Celsius seems to be much more worse in the case of Europe. Now, human impact is where we are seeing the effect of this heat wave mostly. So, France has experienced about 1,000 excess deaths. That means if all the European countries you consider together, France seems to be at a higher risk. 40% rise in death at homes have been recorded, and mostly people who are having lower immunity, the people who are more than 65 plus years of age, they are seem to affected worse by this particular weather phenomena. Heat stroke and dehydration is one of the common reason behind the death of the related stresses as such. And because of these problems, cardiovascular complications seems to have risen in the population of these countries. Now, record temperature are being observed all across the country. If you look here from the map, you can see Germany is recording temperature of 41.7 degrees Celsius, which itself is very high temperature even from the equatorial and tropical standard. In the India, in the peak summer, temperature in many countries goes to 42, 43 degrees Celsius, and these are temperature being recorded in Europe now. That will tell you how severe is the effect of global warming and climate change being faced all across the world. Czech Republic similarly 41, Poland 40.5 degrees Celsius. Germany hottest day was recorded in its entire history for 3 consecutive days, and the regions such as Koskan, Doxani, and Slubice, we have seen much more higher temperature, record temperature. Europe, this we can say, is under extreme heat. If you look at this particular map, you can clearly see the redder the area, redder the color, higher is the temperature. So you can see here northwestern part of Europe, this is where you have dark red color, and all the way up to Italy along the Mediterranean coast, we are experiencing very high temperature. If you go further up north, due to the latitudinal effect, obviously you can see the color becomes lighter. That means the effect of heat wave is relatively lower in the areas such as Scandinavia, UK, or further in the northern west eastern Europe as such. Millions of people have been exposed to it. Hundreds of deaths we have seen is reported, and to basically protect the children, schools in many places have been closed, and the power grids is continuously under pressure. and emergency services seems to be out of stretch as such. Now, as far as the government response is concerned, several events which were planned to take place in the June itself, they have been cancelled. For example, France, we have restriction on the public drinking event because you understand the water crisis is going to hit hard. That's why already decisions have been taken to restrict the public drinking. Paris Pride Week, that is to celebrate the LGBT community, that was planned in the Paris, the capital city of France, that has been cancelled due to the heat wave like situation. Netherlands, there is one of the largest music festival of Europe takes place in the Netherlands called as DEFCON 1. That festival has to be cancelled as well, again because of the same heat wave, because again in such festivals you will see large number of people coming to participate, so crowd gathering is very high, and in such a hot temperature, especially in daytime, the management of crowd can also be difficult and can create further disaster. So code red warning is being issued by all of these countries, and not only that, public health advisories have been issued by the authorities of the country, so that the people are able to take appropriate measures to save themselves, protect themselves from this kind of situation. Now, heat wave and water safety also to some extent seems to be linked here, as we know that many people who are especially living in the areas where do not have proper or adequate houses, we can say the people who do not have any facilities where they can go to take shelter, especially during the hot summer days. So many people take help of the water bodies such as lakes, rivers and all. So 74 drowning that has been reported in France itself. That is because people went in these water bodies to protect themselves from the hot condition and unfortunately died. Mostly rivers, lakes and ponds, that's where we have seen the death is taking place. The recreational water uses, it has become quite higher, and many times the water bodies are unsupervised. That also has led to extra burden on rescuer. Again, you can link it with how generally the weather and climate is in this particular area. These countries face cold situation, and that's why no one want to go in the water bodies. That's why you do not have any this possible any need of any rescue workers in the water bodies, but that situation is also changing. Now, the biggest question that comes is what might be the reason behind the heat wave development. So, a phenomena that takes place in this region called as heat dome is the main reason behind this particular incident as such. When we talk about heat dome can be understood by this particular diagram. You can see that there is a persistent high pressure system. When you have high pressure system, the air is moving in the downward direction, and because of the summer, temperature near the ground surface is hot. When the temperature near the ground surface is hot, that means the air will become warm. So air is becoming warmer, it is trying to go up, but the high pressure that is developing in this area, it does not allow warm air to rise up. It basically pushes the warm air back to the surface. Now, as the warm air is pushed back toward the surface, what happens? It is compressed, and when the warm air compresses, it further heats up. Okay, as we know that general law of physics, if you compress something, it will heat up. If you expand something, it will cool. So here, the high pressure compresses the warm air, that causes the warm air to convert into hot air to some extent, we can say. And also, if the warm air is not able to rise up, that means moisture would not be transported in the upper atmosphere. If moisture is not transported to the upper atmosphere, that means no condensation, no rainfall. So people will have a dry condition. There is no rainfall, humidity is very, very less. So dry air blocks cloud formation. So you have hot condition, dry condition, and strong sunlight is falling on the surface. So due to this region, the heat remains trapped, the hot air remains trapped on the surface for extended duration. As such, that worsens the crisis. So this entire thing is called as heat wave caused by heat dome. Climate change is clearly a major factor behind these unusual weather phenomena, because we have seen Europe is warming at a rate faster than the entire world, warming at 2 times the global average. Heat wave can become kind of more frequent and a kind of fixed phenomena every year if we do not take appropriate adequate measures to tackle the climate change and its effect. Greater intensity and frequency can be seen in the future as well, and the extremes of climate. And it is not only about the heat wave in Europe. We can talk about the monsoon in India also. We'll talk about the cold wave like situation that develops in the high latitude area. All of these weather events, cyclones, tornadoes, all of these weather events are becoming much more extreme. They are being amplified. And the main reason and main factor behind this can be clearly the global warming led climate change. Now, also sometimes question comes into mind that why temperature of 41 degree, 42 degrees Celsius, which seems very common in India, especially during summer, is where which is being talked about all time in the news. Why Europeans feel more hot in the same temperature of 41, which is kind of normal summer temperature in the India. And the reason behind this is that it's not only the value of temperature that matters, but the same temperature value can be felt differently by different people depending on various circumstances. These circumstances can be humidity. For example, if a person is living in an area with high humidity, then he would feel more heat stress, more uncomfortable than compared to person living in the dry area with the same temperature. And the reason is because of our body's natural cooling mechanism. If our body's natural cooling mechanism is based on the sweating effect, when we sweat, the sweat then evaporates in the atmosphere, taking the heat content from our body, thus making us feel cooler. But if you have high humidity in the atmosphere, sweat cannot evaporate. And if sweat cannot evaporate, that means the cooling effect will not be observed. If cooling effect is not observed, the same temperature will be felt more uncomfortable, oppressive by the people in high humidity environment. Wind flow. If the wind is moving, then also it increases the evapotranspiration rate. Evaporation rate gives you a cooling effect. So in this heat dome situation, we have seen that there is no movement of wind at all. The entire warm wind gets trapped by the heat dome. Whether the sunlight is direct or indirect, that also affects what extent of heating you will observe. And most importantly, we have discussed that before also in European countries, the home design is to keep in mind the cooler temperature, the winter situation, the cold temperature that you have in these areas, and that's why the window sizes are very, very small. Example, air condition is missing. You have the designing in such a way that the all heat from the sun which is coming in the house remains trapped, and if more and more heat is coming in the area, that means it will get more trapped. That means the temperature inside house will be very, very high. So home design is playing a very important role here, which is very different, very drastically different from equatorial and tropical countries. And at the same time, to some extent, urban heat island effect is also being observed here because of the material used to the construction in these urban areas. Now, what is the WHO recommendation? So, heat health action plans should be prepared on a regional basis, at a national basis. Early warning systems we should put in place so that the adequate measures can be taken before the worst weather hits us. Protect the vulnerable group. Again, when we talk about vulnerable group, this refers to those group who are forced to spend most of their time in the open, in the road, near the roads, and are directly observing or experiencing the strong insolation as such. Those vulnerable groups, or the elders, for example, who have lesser humidity, lesser resistance, or the children, for example. So these are the vulnerable groups where government should emphasize or focus more. The infrastructure should be climate resilient. That means we should take into account the effect of global warming, climate change, and we should design public infrastructure also in similar manner so that people can take shelter whenever they feel extreme stress or heat stress. You should have drinking water facilities in the public areas, in the city areas, urban areas, and all that. And overall, the effect should, the effort should be to ensure urban cooling rather than the household cooling. And healthcare should be prepared to tackle heat-related stresses. Urban cooling. Recently, we have seen examples in China where regularly misting and spraying of water through fine nozzles by moving truck is being done to provide a sense of relief to the people from this kind of stress as such. So that's all about this particular video. I hope you got the gist behind the development of heat wave in Europe, why it is just different and different from the equatorial and tropical countries, to what extent of damage we can experience from this, and what should be the way forward. That's all for this video. Thank you.